That's ugly. Could have done.
You should have done.
Oh, last night we had like this serious windstorm.
Uh-huh.
And I go out there and it's a disaster in front of my house and on the side of the house and in the back of the house.
So the
Not really.
Banshees came through North California last night.
Pretty much.
Or toward the path of destruction, and you had to clean it up
Right.
on your day off. So
Pretty much. And they took a family member.
Yeah,
Imagine that.
yeah, you mentioned the Banshee, so you understand that Banshees
Oh, yeah.
are Irish Celtic lore, and that they cry to warn the family that somebody's going home. Funnily enough, Banshee was my pagan name for over 10 years. People called me
Really?
that instead of my actual name. Yes.
Wow.
Because I'm a forewarner. That's what I do.
What's the other one? Premonition type. What's the difference between telling like the future and a premonition?
What is the difference between a premonition and telling the
I don't think there is one.
There
Right?
isn't. So maybe prema is before cognation, before knowing.
Mm,
So
okay.
it's the same.
Yeah. I'm going to start. I need to start reading more Carl Jung stuff.
Oh, that's sexy. You should totally do that.
That's, I don't know about that, but I do need to learn more about some of that stuff, I guess. But remember, I was telling you I'm not really into the woo, but got to know some of these
Carl
things,
Jung is
right?
rude. That is hilarious. I love that.
Well, not really woo, I guess.
Maybe.
I spread woo out, like anything that falls in between mediums and psychics to fifth dimension, 5D, and all that stuff. But now I can kind of see where, okay, maybe I shouldn't categorize this in here and that and there, and all
Give
that stuff.
everybody time. Give yourself time to categorize and label. And that's where Jung will help you, because he goes into archetypes. But I
Oh,
would
it's true.
go for Joseph Campbell. He's a lot less intellectual. He's not a
Okay.
Swiss. A Swiss psychologist is very hard to read sometimes, but Joseph Campbell speaks to you like you're a person.
I've heard the name. I've never looked him up, but I am going to.
So he is our treasure in America, our American mythologist. And he brought back many of the old stories that our ancestors knew and that we knew in past lives. So even if you want to jog some past life memories, you can go look at your Joseph Campbell, American mythologist. And he's all over on video. You can find him. And I'm always tweeting about him.
Very
But
cool. I
Carl
think
Jung
that's
is
probably where I've seen it from. It's from
Probably.
your feed.
But Jung is for other people who have a different taste or flavor. And what you were discussing before was mostly things you cannot see, you doubt. That's what you were describing. And then we can go back to Bram Stoker, who was an occultist who wrote Dracula.
Dracula.
And he put the words in the mouth of Dr. Van Helsing. And Van Helsing said, "You cannot let your eyes see nor your ears hear that which you cannot account for." Which is sexy too. So what that meant was metaphysical. He was actually describing the term metaphysical. Meta means beyond, and physical obviously means physical. And as an occultist and a mystic, I understand that the physical is tied to your five senses.
Wow.
Ta-da! And if you can't five sense it, you're not feeling it. But I know you feel beyond your five senses. And that's where we start tapping in to get beyond the physical into the metaphysical.
Now that's not woo.
Okay, great.
I like that. No, seriously. I mean, I've always believed in ESP.
Why? That's a good question.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel that that there is something to it, because perhaps maybe I've even experienced it.
That's what I'm trying to dig at there, mister. Why do you believe it in particular, not something you've been told?
Check it out. So I'm going to tell you a little quick story.
Great.
When I was maybe between 6 and 8, and like all the family was living at the house.
Yeah.
You know, like my sisters and brother, they'd watch like these scary movies at night. And I was small. I didn't like scary movies. I still don't like some scary movies, but you know, I'm getting better at it. But I'm not kidding. I would hide behind a couch, or, you know, like a chair, a love chair or something like that, you know, just a recliner chair. I was 6 years old. I would hide behind the furniture, and I would have my eyes closed, and I could hear what's on the TV, and I could see what was happening in my mind.
I had the exact same experience. Exactly the same. Even hiding behind furniture. And still, I've done, I closed my eyes like this, and I could still see it.
I saw it.
But what I realized was what I was seeing was actually worse than what was on network television.
Really?
Yes.
Well, what's funny is later on, I would see the movie on TV, and I'm like, I remember this movie. I'm like, what is this? And then I think about it. Oh my God, this is what I saw in my mind when they were watching that movie that one night. And it was really bizarre. I was like, oh my God, this is almost the same thing I was seeing. Holy crap.
We should think about radio waves and television waves and how they get into our third eye, and how we might be able to see the broadcast without a television. Isn't that interesting?
I'm writing that down. Radio waves.
They're frequencies. Projecting to the third eye.
I don't write very fast, sorry. Projecting to the third eye.
Yeah, that would really explain it. But it also explains so many other things that are going on right now, including 5G.
True.
So what movie was it? I'm so curious.
It was I want to say it's called Attack of the Two-Headed Man or something like that.
Ugh,
this was 19. Oh, this was like it's one of those B movies. I mean, it was scary to me, but you know, it was those horror B movies. I think it was like at the time it was 1976. I was born in 1970, so I was either 6 or 7. It was 77 or 76 or 77, and there was a show on TV here in the Bay Area called Creature Features.
Right. I mean, even in Ohio, we heard about that.
Did you? Yeah. Bob Wilkins was the host, and he'd come out, and it's funny. He looked like a total nerd. He'd have a 3-piece suit, and he'd have the typical black frame glasses.
Birth control glasses.
And he'd have his hair parted with a cowlick, and kind of brownish hair, and of course he was a white guy, and he had always had a cigar, and he spoke with a demeanor like this, and he did not sound threatening at all. But he would always smoke a cigar. And of course, it was like the Elvira background, sitting in a chair, all the, it's dark and black and, all kinds of spooky stuff around him. And he would host these movies at night. So he was like the male version of Elvira.
Wow, but
Basically.
he had that like Rod Serling thing going on, like FBI agent archetype or
Yeah.
secret agent,
Right.
sleuth,
Right.
Sherlock Holmes, all that.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, you could tell he was definitely, raised in the 40s and 50s when, everyone wore a suit. Everybody wore a suit, so kind of like the Mad Men thing. Even though I don't really watch that show, I've seen parts of it, but yeah, it was like that. But yeah, he'd play these movies, and there were the old B horror movies, and my family would watch them, and I'd just be scared to death. As a kid, I remember reading about Greek mythology when I was a kid, and then of course, a Clash of the Titans came out around that time. Oh, I know. Yeah, that was great.
The original Clash of the Titans, 1980, 81.
That it was like the worst special effects, but it was like the best. I mean, for the time, it was great, but the story was amazing.
We don't get that story anymore. We only get the effects.
Right. Yeah. And the new one's okay. I mean, it's all right.
The thing about that in particular film, Clash of the Titans, 1980, is that the Andromeda, the princess, she actually has like a sleep paralysis type of experience.
Very good.
Right?
See, synchro. I knew we were leading up to one of those.
Well, also the archetypal man that you just spoke of that hosted the horror show, he's dressed like a typical hat man, which is a different kind of shadow man from the 30s, 40s, that fashion. And I have a blog called The Fashion of Darkness on WordPress, Occult Priestess. And I go through the different fashion trends of evil. And that takes us over to Stephen King's It with the clown, because in that film, they actually discuss why the clown wears that fashion and why he shows up in that way. And that maybe he showed up in a different kind of clown outfit earlier, but he was becoming contemporary, and how darkness can shift its shape because form is the illusion, Jedi, neophyte, because the vibe, the frequency, what we can feel but not see, that is the truth.
Very interesting indeed. Now let's talk a little bit about, I don't want to say mythology. Let's go with lore. How about lore? Is that a good word?
I love that. Actually, I named my son Dylan Lore. It's his middle name.
Oh, that's sweet. Right on. Yeah, I like that. I like that word. And it's a cool name. Very cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the lore of sleep paralysis. Now, remember, we talked earlier, you mentioned that our friend, good buddy Joe Roop of Lighting the Void just recently had a show about sleep paralysis. And the thing about Joe is he experienced this. I'm sure he told you the story.
Yeah. And
the way he experienced it was with a mythological or a lore of a person of lore that is described as an old hag that sits upon your chest or kneeling on your chest or whatever in your face. And when you open your eyes, you see this thing and you cannot move. You cannot talk. You can barely breathe. You can't do anything. You're done. You're just right there. Now, does sleep paralysis go past that? I mean, you were talking about Andromeda and the Greek, mythology with, the Titans and stuff. So
Calibus.
That's right.
Yeah. The dog one.
So how far back does this go?
Well, as you know, most things on the fringe or woo or metaphysical are not well documented in our culture. Not that they weren't before, but in our modern culture, they're not very well documented. I would say, for me and my bloodline and what I've experienced, my sleep paralysis goes back to Ireland and past lives in Ireland as a priestess, as a druid. And we were always fighting the darkness. This is yet just another form of darkness, isn't it? Only the way that it manifests and the way that it stalks families, that is the unique part of sleep paralysis.
Very interesting. And so we could basically just say that, I mean, from the beginning of time, really, I mean,
Every culture that I've
or
lived,
existence.
yeah,
Mhm.
every culture has some kind of history, some kind of entity that they're marrying with the old hag, that now science terms sleep paralysis. And so I like to start at bare bones where we are in our culture. So
Okay.
if you go to a sleep paralysis group on Facebook, which there is, which I'm a part of, or talk to many people who have had sleep paralysis, the first thing they're going to tell you is that this is a a biological issue, that your body is having issues, not anything else. And that's where we can point at science. Science says everything that happens is empirical based on 5 sense evidence, right? That's science in general. So when you go to a doctor or you go to a professional, they're going to tell you that you have some kind of chemical imbalance, that there is a release of a chemical when you go to sleep that paralyzes your body. And for you in particular, for no particular reason, get too much of that chemical and become completely immobile, like a mummy, right?
Right. Mhm.
Don't give away the farm. I won't tell you about Egypt. But
Okay.
I think that's pretty much where all this comes from. But we're here in Ireland with science. And so they give you medications that keep you from being too paralyzed. And actually, I've never been on these medications. I literally don't know what they might do, because having my case of sleep paralysis, which was basically since I was born, all the way very intensely until at least 30 years old, I still had it sometimes after that. But there was no doubt. Think about living with an illness for that long and not figuring it out. You don't, you figure it out. You are convinced that this can't be something that a doctor can wave a wand and get rid of. And we try several different things to get rid of it. Like, call out the name of Jesus is usually the first thing people say. And that does work for some people. Kudos to them. That's great. But I believe this is an act, this thing, this shadow figure, and not all sleep paralysis victims see a shadow figure. So there's different levels of sleep paralysis. Mine was full on crazy madness since I was born. So I was raised in an abusive dream time. You can understand that. My
I can
dream
understand
time
that, yeah.
was like an abusive family. But I did my research and I found out more, and I talked to God about it. And it seemed like I had to go through the very next level of existence to get to my homeland of existence. So we say I left my body, just like most of us, a lot of us do, and getting through the turbulence of the collective unconscious of humanity, the fourth dimension, which is beyond science, brain, although Carl Jung touches on this. But mystics actually go all the way through this into the cosmic consciousness, or Krishna or Christ consciousness. So this is on the way to enlightenment, but it's a bumpy, horrifying road that we should take and be brave enough to take. So I would have to raise above my body, and then I ended up in a place that we call the Bardo, or that the Christians might call the hell realm or the purgatory, where souls that no longer incorporate a physical body, who are still in darkness here in the heart, if they're in darkness, they haven't grown or learned that they are a child of the one true love of us all, then they get stuck in this static of fear and problems. And this also gets fed every day, all the time, by dark feelings and thoughts of people and actions, really dark actions. Feelings and thoughts, not as powerful, but dark actions extremely powerful, and it creates more of that realm. See, it like makes it bigger. So it takes longer and more horrifying to get through it. So what's above that realm? The heaven realms, home. And some of us that volunteered to be here who are helping had to go back home to get some healing, to get some love, to get some light, so that
Right.
we can come back down and do the volunteer work. So many of us are going through this space that I call the bad neighborhood on the way home. Does that all make sense, Dave?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. It almost sounds like, you know, in certain religions and even Judeo-Christian, that this is what we basically, you know, it's basically life. I mean, it's what we're called to do. You know, a lot of people don't believe that, you know, that there is a spirit, child or body, whatever you want to call it. We're before we come to this earth, before we're born, our souls are in a different place with God, and in order to experience this thing we call life, we have to
Separation.
be separation. We have to be born, and so we choose whether or not we want to be with this family that's in, you know, it could be, you know, a poor family in Africa or something like that, or you know, or a well-to-do, you know, family in you know, the United Kingdom, or, you know, if you want to, you know, whatever, you know, you know, you choose who you want to be.
But you also,
And
you're choosing your soul lessons first. You
well, that's
understand?
what
What do I
exactly.
need to
That's
learn? And then what family do I need to teach me
right.
that? Yeah.
So for whatever reason, you know, and again, you know, I'm learning this through my faith, which I mentioned to you. You know, I'm Mormon, so a lot of that Joseph Smith brought up, and so you know, very interesting, very interesting. And yeah, I do believe that you know, there was a previous life before this one that I'm experiencing now. So we go through this life, we go through all of these trials and tribulations, and we experience these other dark forces, unfortunately,
Now that I would say it's
as
the
part of the
apple.
growth.
I think that's the apple lesson that we've all heard of in the Bible. We've really all heard of it, so I like to use it. So the apple
Mhm.
lesson is to discern good from evil. And it's like lesson 101. And it's something that we should be learning as children. In this
Yeah.
society, we're not taught that. It takes a village to kill a child. Thank you. Wow. Somebody, sorry, there's too much political stuff going on right
No,
now.
I understand. I got that. I knew what you meant.
Thank you. So yeah, it's just that we've all been dumbed down. Even the mysteries obviously have been dumbed down. Look at who's popular and famous in the New Age community. So I'm not sure people are ready for me, but I'm ready. So let's go.
Hey,
Mhm.
absolutely. I think that what you're teaching is very important, especially when, as again we talked about it previously, there are people who really need to just be called out.
Yes,
So
sir. Yes, sir. That's very true. And it's not just the in particular people, it's the storyline, it's the narrative. And as
mm,
thank goodness we're waking up, not just conspiracy theorists, but housewives are waking up and understanding that we've been tricked, hoodwinked, literally hoodwinked by Freemasons. That's a bit too much information, but just really tricked. And my spirit guide, Hermes Trismegistus, is a trickster. So he has taught me about tricksters. And
mm,
sometimes I get tricked. And as a kid, the thing I hated the most, I mean, I had horrible things happening to me. But if someone made fun of me, like teased me, like lying,
mm.
you know, that kind of teasing where they're actually lying and you believe them, that is what got my goat every time. Like, well, how am I supposed to know the truth if you're lying to me? And so I think like all of us collectively, as I mentioned, the collective are getting that frequency of truth just kind of coming in there and saying, maybe this place isn't what I thought it was. Maybe this isn't just about me. That's what I want people to come away with. This isn't about you as a tiny little individual having a happy little bubble life at all, and it never has been. But I think the New Age has pushed that and pushed that with their prosperity gospel, and the only reason they pray is ask for stuff and be successful in a materialistic way, because that's all that matters. And that goes back to our medical profession, which also says you have no soul. They are taught that there is no soul, that you're a physical being only, and that your consciousness is a brain only. I'm not saying all doctors believe that, but they have to take an oath and say, yes, I agree with all my teachings. So these are what they're teaching, materialism. And we can go to Joseph Campbell again to look up the lesson of materialism. But it's a disease of the ego, that this is all there is. This is all there is. This is God. This is home. And if that is the level where your consciousness is, you've been brainwashed.
So where does the sleep paralysis come in on this?
It's another dimension. It's an other dimensional phenomenon. It is something that happens to so many people so often that it could not be ignored. And back in the day, like in Ireland and Scotland and all, we knew it. And we said, oh my God, you look like the old hag rode you last night, you know, like have a beer with your breakfast, you know, hair of the wolf that bit you know, right. That kind of stuff. And it was such a loving environment. Even if you had a hag on you, when you woke up in the morning and your family was there, they had compassion for you. They knew what you've been through, and they were going to comfort you and love you through that. And that's something I never got. My mother was just as weird and paranoid as I was. Like, oh my God, is the devil literally after me? What did I do wrong? Shame, fear, ego of darkness. And thank goodness I had those lessons. I mean, I don't regret it, so I can teach it. But at the same time, I feel like I've gone through one of the most traumatic lives ever on the planet. I literally feel that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what, were you raised Catholic or something?
I was raised Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, that's right. Jehovah's Witness. Oh my gosh.
So
you know, it's a little side note here. I'm sorry, I don't mean to change this topic really quick, but
I just want to say Jehovah's Witness is a cult. That's all I wanted to say. Go ahead.
Sure. But what I have previously spoken with a young man at the age of 21 who's just incredibly wise beyond his years. At 15 or 14, or even before that, he was like just reading books and books and books, all kinds of esoteric books. And what he does, he actually gets them from auctions and stuff, and then he trades them, and you know, that's his business. So he kind of does that kind of thing. But I mean, he's like Manly P. Hall, he's you know, Aleister Crowley. He's very well aware of all of this stuff before the age of 19 and 20. I mean, he's too. You know, well, that's what I'm saying. So he does this on Instagram, and I did it, and he had contacted me about, you know, maybe 3 years ago, you know, kind of like early on in my show when I started doing the program. And he's like, man, he's like, I just wanted to let you know that, you know, my mom listens to your show, and I started listening to your show because of my mom, and you got a really cool show. And I just want to say, you know, it's really neat, and that's all this. And I'm like, oh, thanks. And I'm like, well, how old are you? And this and that. And he's like, oh, I'm only like 17. I'm like, what? You know, and then we started talking on Instagram. So I found out that he also had previously been a Jehovah's Witness.
Wow. Well,
and at that, yeah, you need to talk to him. I'll see if you guys can get in touch. He's really cool. He's really young, but it's like you talk to him and you're like, man, he's definitely an old soul. He definitely old soul.
And old souls have picked Jehovah's Witness bloodlines to be born into, because we're cleansing them, because we understand, on a soul level, that it is a cult, and there is a bloodline. We don't like to use the word curse because that seems like you can't lift it, you can't fix it. But let's say bloodline oopsie. that we cleanse. Like my family was diseased with alcoholism and all kinds of mental issues, which are really emotional issues. Shh, don't tell the neighbors kind of stuff, secret lies and secret adoptions and all kinds of twisted stuff was under my family house. And not only that, you know, back generations. And so a light worker would be born into that bloodline, choose that bloodline to clean it. And also
later on,
witnesses teach you to search for the truth. They actually teach you to be researchers. Of course, you're only supposed to research Bible. Not me. I took all of those years of learning how to research and I put it to good use. And so is this kid.
Oh man. Wait till you meet him. Okay. You guys have got to meet. I'm serious.
Together.
I would love that actually. And it, you know, if anything, it would definitely have to do with Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
But you know, it's all good. Like, look, the way I look at it is there is always some truth in everything.
Pretty much.
So, you know, whether it was a, you know, a cult religion or, you know, new age, you know, stuff, there is some truth in some of that. That's being told.
They stole it from somewhere originally. So they took it from the original truth somewhere, then twisted it for control and power.
You could say that. You could say that. So I believe that there's something, you know, going on, you know, even with, you know, the Mormon church, you know, the Church of Jesus Christ, LDS. So any religion to me, it's a cult. I mean, and you know, that's
really? Well,
that's the way I look at it.
Football teams and politics, like everything that has a group mind, group think, group speak.
Well, I mean, if we want to talk, I mean, we could even say American Idol is a cult.
Yeah, but you know, we got to look at cult leaders.
Cult following.
Because you can't have a cult unless you have cult leader, and that leader wants something from you, not just devotion, but something else. And that's where the questions like is
the owner of that show wants your money. So,
well, we can say everything on TV wants your money.
That's true. They want something from you.
Yeah, so, we can boil that down and get into the game of energy play, because that's really what all of this is. To go back to the Jedi and say, feel the force, Luke. Is this a dark force or is this a light force? And I'd like to say that the darkness, we think of it as a color or a pitch. Darkness is actually the absence of light. And I think that's a huge concept for maybe intellectual people who like to think a lot and they like to chew on it, but also meditators, people who meditate and ask the most impossible questions in meditation. That's one of them, like one hand clapping. Well, how can we have absence of light and what does that mean? So good for those who meditate.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and by the way, yeah, I read some of that stuff you sent me about Maitreya and Bodhisattva and all that. Did you get to look at some of those exercises at all?
I looked at the whole exercise. So introduce your exercises and give us a premise so that I can speak about it.
So the exercises are from Falun Dafa, Falun Gong, and there are 5 energy exercises, much like Tai Chi or you know, even it's basically Qigong, yeah. So I sent those exercises to you, and I sent them so you could take a look at them. Now I practice them, and I'm going to tell you again, it really helps me, and I really feel that because I have health issues with diabetes, sometimes you know high blood pressure, and when I practice those exercises, which I don't do on a daily basis, I'm not going to lie to you. But if I was to do it every day and I did them exactly the way they're supposed to be done, and I followed everything the way you're supposed to be taught and Falun Dafa, I would probably feel even at least 75% better.
Why don't you talk about what is true? So when you do the exercises, how is that?
When I do the exercises, I feel great.
How was great to you? Like, what describe great?
Feeling crappy, and then afterwards I feel great.
There you go. It's a big call. But the funny thing was, when I watched the exercises, I was like, I've been doing a lot of these intuitively since I was a child, especially this part, because well, I
Yes.
guess in Wicca we learn about saging yourself, and a
Okay.
lot of those postures were like they're energy calming. They're actually, you're taking the leviathan of your energy field, which is like probably whacked out, and taking it and bringing it into alignment with the whole, with the one, with the chi. And it's a very powerful exercise. But I would love for you to challenge yourself for 7 days to do the exercises for 1 week, once a day, and see if your miracle that you happens, But you don't have to practice every day, especially you're a householder, you're out in the world, you're doing a lot of things that aren't, they're physical. And so that takes the mind out of 24/7 meditation. Some of us
Yes.
have created a lifestyle where we can have a 24/7 meditation and connection, and we're teachers for a very big reason like that. And so don't beat up on yourself is what I'm trying to say. Don't try to be
Yeah.
loose if you're not. It's all good, because these things help us, and that's what they're there for. And I looking at the exercise, I understood right away that this would help.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. And the thing, I'm looking up something right now. That's why my eyes are kind of deviated away a little bit. But I wanted to mention that. So a gentleman, Asian, Chinese, of course, from China. He was my landlord. He introduced it to me.
Lovely.
And so through synchronicity, I believe, I was able to meet an older woman who practiced it. And funny story with her, before she learned about Falun Dafa or Falun Gong. She knew no other language other than English. So she starts practicing, and for some reason, she starts understanding Chinese.
Wow. Talk about past life going back.
Out of the blue. How weird is that?
It's a beautiful miracle. And I understand that it's definitely past life memory. Like, I know French from my past life. When I was a child, we had French neighbors. How weird is that, in Ohio? And I played with their kids. I had French friends who did not speak a lick of English. And I would blah, 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 blah. And they acted like they
Wow.
understood me. And also,
You're like, they're sure, yeah, whatever.
Hermes is the god of language. And I understand, if I'm a fully enlightened being, I will know all languages. So it's really cool. And also, I don't know if you've ever heard of foreign accent syndrome.
I have heard of that. As a matter of fact, I know you. I don't know if you may know this person, but oh God, see, now I'm starting to draw a blank. But she's on Facebook quite a bit, and she was actually one of my guests. But supposedly, interestingly, one day she's speaking like us, and then the next thing you know, she's got a British accent for no reason.
British, did she? Oh, lovely. Have
British.
A
But it's like, I'm gonna say, you know what, whatever. I mean, anything can happen, right? Who am I to say that? It's
what
fake or whatever.
I just think it's awesome.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I'm sure there's. I'm just saying there's some people that probably don't believe it, and it's like, well, I do. I mean, why not? There's, like you were saying, there's some people who one day they're speaking English, the next minute they're speaking Swedish, and they, it's like, what happened? Something happened.
Exactly.
But,
it's not a brain problem. I don't believe science can tell you what happened there, but I actually had foreign accent syndrome for 3 weeks. I first heard about it on the Donahue show. That's how old I am. Woohoo!
I remember Donahue.
So he had foreign accent syndrome people on there. It was in the news. It was like all at once, people were talking about it, and then it faded away. Just like, Art Bell would bring up a topic, it would get pretty big, then it would go away.
Sure.
But I had foreign accent syndrome during a Kundalini awakening. So I was in like a mystical state. I wasn't, I couldn't do math. I probably couldn't even tell you my name. I was the spiritual being, not a physical doer. So that's a little difficult to explain in a short amount of time. But I was merging with my guru who had passed on to the summer lands. She was kind of sitting on my head, which is not too strange in a Buddhist lineage, especially the Karma Kagyu lineage, my Tibetan lineage. But as she was integrating with me, my voice changed completely.
Oh,
And
wow.
I sounded up. I don't even know how I sounded. It was very quiet and I can't even do it. It was very sweet. But for 3 weeks. And so I had to talk on the phone. I thought, no one's going to recognize my voice. This isn't me. And it was so shocking, literally shocking. But I was also in the Kundalini awakening. So I was accepting kind of what was happening to me, because it takes over your entire, you have no ego anymore, ever. And it's like you're a creature and not a human. It's really weird. And I have videos, I have a whole series, I have 18 videos in a series called The Kundalini Journey about this. But I didn't put this in there. The foreign accent was something I couldn't control or handle or undo. And I could see my guru in my third eye in a golden bubble, like right on my head. Like she was sitting like a Buddha, excuse me, sitting like a Buddha on my head. And that golden light is what, I actually fell asleep one night and I felt spirit guides tuning, literally, like I had a piano, a golden piano in here, and they were, or a harp, and they were tuning it. And I know that that's metaphysical as well. And that my voice can do things now that it couldn't do before. And the thing about gurus and mystics, they can Shakti pot you. They can give you like sitar eyes, which are little enlightenments, or it's like having a wizard for a teacher. It's really cool.
That is really cool.
But that was scary. I mean, it was because I have an ego identity. And when I call my friend, I want her to know I'm the one on the phone. So I was unrecognizable over recordings. And
That is
really weird.
That is different. I mean,
And that's
it's weird.
I have to live with it. Like, this isn't Korinne Wilson. What do you mean it's not me? You don't sound like you. I didn't. So I lost my identity in several ways.
How long did that last?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. That's
Yeah.
quite a while. Yeah, I mean, you probably were thinking, this is never going to go away. I'm never.
Concerned.
Yeah. That's scary.
It was. Because I was an adult. It didn't happen that long ago. Maybe 7-8 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. Around 2011, I think. When everything happened for me, around 2011, metaphysically, the whole world changed. Metaphysically, physically, I think we're here now, finally, at 2020.
See, that's not too long ago. When I think about that, I mean, that's 9 years ago. You know, I mean,
and endings in numerology.
That's true. 9 is an interesting number. I've heard it's even an evil number, but
I don't
we could talk about that on another show. we could talk about numbers on another show.
Sure. I'm not a math.
Really. By the way, I know we're going to jump around here a little bit because I didn't get to say today we are speaking with Occult Priestess Korinne Wilson. Thank you very much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dave. I bugged Dave and said, Dave, could we do a show about sleep paralysis? He's like, sure, honey. I'm like, oh, good, thank you. So I definitely requested to come on here and see you guys.
I'm sorry, I didn't get to say that at the beginning, but for all intents and purposes for the show, when I chop it up and I put it back together, I promise it'll sound good. So, anyways,
I'm having
also,
a good time, Dave.
Oh yeah, I always have a good time talking to you, and I also need to do. Let's pause for a commercial break, and when we come back, we are speaking more with Occult Priestess Korinne Wilson.